Welcome today to the third part of our lecture series here at the Center for European Studies. My name is Devin Beecher, this is Hannah Gundert, and we're happy to present to you Dr. Risto Raivio from the European Commission. Dr. Risto Raivio the study he's going to present is going to focus on the role of community colleges in supporting local skill strategies and regional economic development. Currently, Dr. Raivio works for the European Commission in the Directorate General for Education and Culture and heads the sector for vocational education and training policies. These policies are very topical today in Europe, as many countries are trying to cope with the consequences of the financial crisis, which lead to a high youth unemployment rate in many European countries. Policymakers are interested in improving vocational training, which helps the transition from learning to working life. Therefore, the Commission supports policy dialogue between member states and social partners to enhance the quality, effectiveness, and relevance of vocational education and training systems.
So previously, Dr. Raivio headed the citizenship unit of the Education and Cultural Directorate General, promoting active European citizenship. In this area, he conducted a structured dialogue with a wide spectrum of civil society organizations and representatives of local and regional authorities. From 1996 to 2002, he worked for the Committee of the Regions, a consultative EU body representing local and regional authorities in EU decision-making. So before joining the EU institutions, Dr. Raivio was a researcher at the University of Tampere in Finland, and he also spent a study and research period in the University of Constance, Germany, from 1990 to 92. Dr. Raivio has been an elected local councillor in his hometown Pirkala in Finland. He has chaired the local executive board, been the vice chair of the local education committee, and has been actively involved in various civil society organizations. Dr. Raivio is happily married, and he has two sons who both graduated in the field of social sciences, and whom he so far unsuccessfully has tried to advise to join the TEN program at UNC. And he's a passionate tennis player, and he says about himself that he has reached a combination of age and level where improvement can only come through a smarter game plan. So, as some of you might know, Dr. Raivio has been at UNC before. He has participated at the EU fellowship program in the fall semester of 2011. So we're glad to have him back, and I'd like you to join me in welcoming him, Dr. Risto Raivio.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to come back to Chapel Hill and to share with you what I learned last year, and also to explain a little bit what kind of debate it feeds in Europe. And so my presentation today will follow this kind of storyline, that I will first little bit explain you the context of the skills issues, skills challenges in Europe, and when I do that, then I will be obliged to use the notion of vocational education and training. And I thought that it might be useful to explain you a little bit what is vocational education and training typically in European education systems. Then we move to the question that why did I actually decided to come to North Carolina and to look at the community colleges. What was the question and my expectation that I could actually find some kind of lessons that would be useful for the European policy debate. And then I will explain did I find any lessons, what lessons I found, and so I will shortly explain them, and then also explain the debate what I have had now. I went back to Brussels in January this year, and within the 9 months that has passed now, I have had a couple of presentations on this issue inside Commission, but also outside with different stakeholders, and I will very shortly explain you about this kind of dissemination of the results. And then I will also put the question other way around, that based on what I have observed here, what kind of lessons actually or what are the elements in European education systems that might be useful for US stakeholders to look at as a possible source for inspiration. And finally, throughout the presentation, there are a couple of issues that might be interesting for further studies for those who are learning and studying European integration. And I will, at the very end, if we have time, point out a couple of tips, a couple of possible subjects. Of course, all what I will tell is very interesting and would be good for further studies, but I will point out some specific issues, mainly narrowly related to kind of governance issues, which would be probably worth looking at. So the skills challenges in Europe, it is an issue which is currently very topical, very much in the center of debate, and it comes from the fact that since the economic crisis and the Europe has developed its strategy how to exit from the crisis and what would be the pathway from now towards a kind of productive economy, competitive economy. And in that context, if there is one word that has been identified as a key element, it's innovation. Innovation, which is considered as the only opportunity for European economy to remain competitive in the world context. And innovation, but also kind of necessity to create more sustainable development, more sustainable economy in ecological terms. Both elements, they actually require better skills. And so require also the third element of the big strategy called Europe 2020, the inclusive growth, which means that everybody should have an opportunity to participate and to benefit from the economy. To be able to participate, it also requires certain skills, and therefore all these they draw attention to education and training system. There is also understanding that growth is not going to happen in all sectors. There are certain sectors and parts of economy that are more promising than the others, and that poses a challenge to education and training systems. How education and training systems are capable to provide these kind of skills that are relevant to these sectors to sufficient number of students, and at the same time, of course, keeping the kind of spirit of open society where every individual is of course free to decide and shape his own aspirations and educational choices. And then, of course, we have in European Union, in European context, in relation to these skills issues and the demand and supply issues, we have the geographic aspect. We have currently, I don't remember actually the exact figure, but about 24 million unemployed people in Europe. But we have millions of open jobs also. But they are also geographically in different places to a very high extent. So there is a skills mismatch to a certain extent related to sectors, but even in a bigger terms, geographic mismatch. And the challenge is, of course, to cope with both elements, and therefore we have a kind of drive towards strategies which would combine territorial and sector elements. So the key notion in that context is smart specialization strategies. We have Stuart Rosenfeld here with us, and Stuart is one of the world experts in terms of when it comes to smart specialization. He has been also advising European Commission in these issues, and that's one of the current challenges in the skills area. How do we generate dynamism which will, in a smart way, combine the territorial and sector elements? Now, high youth unemployment rates currently in Europe, they are specifically drawing attention and kind of creating a sense of urgency in relation to these skills issues, skills development, and there has been this year actually when I decide my study plan to come here and look at these skills issues, I had a feeling that it's very topical and it feeds into our political agenda. When I came back January this year, it was even more topical because very high level political attention was drawn to these issues, and specifically the question of efficient vocational education systems which combine learning at school and at the workplace, that has become now a kind of high topical issues, which is an issue of peer learning between member states at the level of experts, but also at the level of policymakers and even political decision makers. Then we have, of course, the issue that skills needs are continuously changing, and new skills are needed, and skills have to adapt to the changing situation. And when we look, for example, 10 years ahead, we know that most of those who will be on the labor markets in 10 years, they are already now on labor markets. They are already now working, and therefore the challenge comes to the issue of how our education system, training systems will provide opportunities for those who are on the labor market now, how they will have opportunities to update and widen their skills profile so that they remain well adapted to the situation which is changing continuously. And we have a kind of changing profile issue in that terms also, that it looks that more and more what is required is a very good mix of academic generic skills and job-specific skills, and this combination, providing both of them, it's a very difficult challenge actually for education training systems, and it is one of the challenges that is notably promoting this attention and drawing this attention to these work-based learning opportunities. I will come back to that issue a bit later. Now, this was what I said before, was looking the skills challenges concerning the substance itself. Now, two issues that are important to remember or to pay attention to as a kind of framework issues. One is that of course the financial crisis has also influenced dramatically to the capacity of public authorities to intervene, and everybody is looking for possibilities to save, and therefore the solution cannot be that we put much more money into education and training systems. The solution must be found in a way of investing in a more efficient way and more intelligent way to go towards smarter education and training systems. And another framework condition that I wanted to mention to you is, of course, the kind of governance issue in that terms that the way how European Union is working in this kind of field where competencies of the European Union are very weak, that you know certainly by heart. You have been studying European law and the conditions. European Union is not doing any directives in the area of education and training. Competencies are at the level of member states. But within the Europe 2020, there is this notion of European semester, where every year this goes around in that way. The Commission is doing first a kind of analysis that what are the important issues that we should particularly invest to make the Europe 2020 strategy effective in member states, and then member states respond to that with their own strategy documents, so that so we would like to take this and this kind of reforms further in our countries, and Commission analyzes them, and then Council, on the basis of Commission proposal, is doing country-specific recommendations to the member states. And this has a huge impact in the whole way of working, how the relationship between Commission and member states actually evolves in practice, and how the European level cooperation between member states in these fields where the competencies are weak, how it actually is put into practice. And that is it's a challenge in that way that we are trying to learn a way of working in a much more country-specific manner in these fields. Just as an example for you, in the field of vocational training, we have since 10 years, we have had every second year a kind of policy report looking what has happened in the field of vocational educational training, and then at the same time looking what are the priorities for the future. But when you look at these reports, so far they have been relatively country neutral. There have been analysis of trends and maybe some country examples, mainly best examples, but there has not been country-specific information in that way that you could actually see that these countries have improved in relation to this particular aspect of vocational training, and these countries have not done their homework in relation to this and this aspect. And this is now the tendency. We are moving towards a situation where country analysis is more specific and deeper, and also the recommendations are getting more country-specific. Generally within the Europe 2020 process, but also then within the sector-specific policies. So just some words about this vocational education training. We call it VET. Those who work in the field of education and training, they know that VET means vocational education training. Those who don't, they think that it is something with veterinary or something like that. But it's about vocational education training. In Europe, in most of the European countries, we have vocational training which is parallel to what are the last 3 years of high school here in your system. And so students between 15 and 19 years, in some countries it starts when you are 15, and in some countries when you are 16. In some countries it starts also earlier, and it is longer than the last 3 years of your high school. But in a simplified way, the last 3 years you have two options. You continue in the what we call general education with a more academic orientation, or you go to vocational training which provides an occupation-specific training, so that when you come out from that training program, you would have a profile directed to certain type of jobs on the labor market, and you have relatively good access to this kind of jobs. In the European Union, 50%, so exactly half of young people, they go to this kind of vocational training track during the upper secondary level. But the country varieties are huge. We have about 14% in vocational training in Cyprus, and we have about close to 80% in Austria going to vocational education training. This kind of training pathway is very attractive, very highly respected, considered as a positive way of continuing the education. In many countries, Austria, Germany, Denmark, Finland, Netherlands are part of those countries where it's very well respected. Also, we could say that in these countries, in some others also, Europe really has a kind of world level standard and benchmark excellence in vocational training. But we have many other countries where vocational training is qualitatively lagging behind. It's not considered attractive. It's more considered as a kind of option for losers even in some cases. And so the differences are very, very big there. Basically, two kind of organizational models for vocational training. One is called dual system or apprentices system sometimes, and it means a model where the learner actually has a contract with a company, and the company is then formally a training provider, education provider, and the learner has then or spends more or less half or 60-70% of the time in the company, and in combination with that then 30-40% in a education institution, vocational training institution. The learner gets also paid during that time, so it's attractive also in that terms that you start to earn money when you enter into that kind of learning program. And then we have school-based models where, which most of them, they also combine learning at the school and at the workplace, but the kind of training provider responsibilities on the side of the school, the learner possibly then goes for a couple of times during this 3-year training to companies, spend their 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months during that time, but is in most cases not getting any salary from that, and does not have this kind of long-term relationship to one company, which is typical for a dual system. In some of the dual systems, maybe if you have 3 years program, you also spend your time in a couple of companies, so it is not always one company, but in many cases you have a contract with one company which provides you the training program. We have in Europe currently a situation in educational training where we are doing a big exercise of comparing the levels of different education and training programs. And this exercise is getting to a situation now, let's say end of this year and next year, then we will start to have a very good overview of how different programs in different countries with a big diversity that we have in Europe, how actually they, in terms of levels, how they compare to each other. But we know already now from the process that strongest vocational training programs, they are classified to be something which would be equal to associate degree, so short cycle higher education, and some of them even comparable to the level of a bachelor program, so the first cycle of higher education. We have a situation where in some countries this vocational training articulates very well with the rest of the education system, that if you go to vocational training you can afterwards continue in university, for example. In some other countries the articulation is very difficult and not very well developed, and that is one of the challenges, to integrate vocational training in such a way in the education system that you always have opportunities to continue your learning in a proper manner. Going back to the question of unemployment rate and the challenge of developing learning environment which leads and facilitates the transition from learning to work, this is one of the tables that we have recently been looking at. This classifies horizontally the youth unemployment rates in member states into 3 categories. On the left side you have those who have below 15% youth unemployment rate, in the middle those between 15 and 25, and on the right hand countries who have more than 25%, so higher than 25% youth unemployment rate. And then vertically, we have used OECD data on the on the nature of education at the upper secondary level, and we have there the fact that whether work-based learning is integrated in your learning at the upper secondary level. So this includes those that are in the vocational training and those who are in the general education training. We have countries where more than 30% of the whole learner population at upper secondary level have at least 25% work-based learning, so 25% in companies. And we have those, the second in the middle is between 6 and 30%, and then the lowest category, those who practically have very, very little work-based learning. And if you combine these two, you will see that we have a concentration of countries who have high youth unemployment rate and very little work-based learning at upper secondary level. And when you go to the other corner, you have countries who have high level of work-based learning and low youth unemployment rate. This is, of course, as you know, as social scientists, this does not mean that there is a causal relationship necessarily between these. You can also see that on the right down corner, you have countries who are just currently doing economically badly, and other way around. So the reasons to which explain this can be multiple. But anyway, it is relatively striking table. I have been talking a lot. It's time to put one question. Youth unemployment rate is probably the most wrongly cited or referred statistical fact in Europe currently. It happens, for example, quite often that a politician is saying that we have an urgency in Europe because 50% of young people are unemployed in Spain. Spain has youth unemployment rate which is 48, I think, today. So they're saying half of young people in Spain are unemployed. What is wrong in that statement?
There's students. They're in university or students?
Students, yeah. So youth unemployment rate is calculated from those who are available for labor market. In Spain, for example, about 60% of this young people cohort is in school or university or somewhere, and from the remaining 40%, half are unemployed. So about 20% of the whole cohort would be unemployed. And but 20% is absolutely too much. So we still have the urgency in Europe. Just it is typically wrongly cited. So why to look at community colleges and why to focus on North Carolina? Community colleges, when I started to look at this issue, it drew my attention to the fact that actually they are in a very interesting way in a kind of institutional crossroad in education system. They are combining the kind of bridge to upper secondary education through, for example, in North Carolina through these early college programs, and at the same time bridging to universities with these transfer opportunities from community college to university. Similarly, there is combination of academically oriented programs, degree programs in the in community colleges, and then vocationally oriented programs that lead to labor market in a similar way than vocational training in European systems. They also provide a lot of continuing training, career development for individuals and corporate development, responding to the needs of companies within the service area. And also, community colleges are providing opportunities for adults who are in need of development of basic skills and civic skills and so on. And then there is this whole community development aspect in the notion, in the name of the institution already. So very interestingly, actually, the issues that I mentioned earlier in different vocabulary relate in relation to skills challenges in Europe. They find their place in the normal service of community colleges, and North Carolina is one of the systems in US which is very highly regarded because of two issues. On the other hand, you have one of the most comprehensive community college systems in terms of addressing all these functions. That's not the case in all states, that all these functions are addressed by community colleges. And at the same time, then, and even more importantly for my study, was the fact that North Carolina is known from the history and the experience that community college system is very much engaged in the economic development policies and strategies of the state, and it's the system as such is a partner with economic development policymakers and agencies, and for these reasons I thought it would be interesting to look at the community colleges. I have here a kind of picture that I made more or less in this way when I was planning my study. It has a little bit developed during the study, but it still has more or less the same visual presentation. And so here in the middle, in this, what is this pie? Yeah. We have the four basic functions of community colleges. So the transfer function and to universities, this academic preparation, bringing higher education opportunities close to everybody in the communities. Then this function of applied associate degrees, so preparing people to labor market directly, be it a degree or be it diploma or certificate. Then this whole workforce development issue of providing targeted learning opportunities depending the needs of the companies or depending needs of those who are already in the labor markets. And then the community-related basic skills and civic skills function. And that relates directly to what we have on the agenda in EU. Here, these are the issue that you have this applied associate degree. This is short cycle higher education, so it's higher education level qualification, but leads to labor market. It relates to the issue that we discuss when we speak about vocational excellence and the fact that vocational training the vocational training systems must include pathways to level of associate or even bachelor degrees. This relates to the issue of what we of course identify also in Europe, need to upgrade and update skills of those who are in the labor market. And here in upper corner the question of articulation with the rest of the education system and notably articulation between vocational training and universities. It's an interesting and kind of urgent issue in Europe also, and it is institutionally, let's say, part of the community college system's nature. Then I have put here in the outskirts of the slide different organizations or stakeholder groups that are naturally actually partners of community colleges, and that was very much also in my mind as a question when I came, that it looked to me that community colleges are they naturally have a strong partnership approach with relevant stakeholders in their own community, at the state level also, between different colleges. What happened? Between different colleges, be it at the level of states, for example in North Carolina the 58 community colleges are networking and working together, but also in national context, American Association of Community Colleges being a strong representative of this system at a federal level, speaking on behalf of this sector. We have in Europe, for example, currently, I would say 4 weak associations representing the vocational training providers. It's an issue where, let's say, the kind of interest representation of this sector is currently under development, and we would like to see that they consolidate their interest representation and become a stronger partner also at the EU level. So these were issues that I had also in my mind when designing the study. Just a kind of illustration that if you know community colleges, probably you know, and at least what I explained before reminds you about that. This is one EU country, education system in one of the EU countries. And it's quite interesting actually to think that where would community colleges be in that? So this is simple, this is one of the most simple systems, so that's why I took it. You see it's very complicated, but it is, believe me, it is one of the simplest systems in Europe. But so here, comprehensive school, everybody in that country goes to the same school until 16 years, and then they have 2 options, the upper secondary general education or vocational qualification. 3 years or 2 to 4 years, actually I've made a mistake here, it would be between 2 and 4 years, so individual adaptability possibility there anyway, but more or less half of young people go here and half go there. Those who go to vocational training after this vocational qualification, they either go to working life, or they continue in polytechnics, typically for engineering or nursing or something like that, or they can also go to universities, but not very many go in that way. So the learning pathway is more vertical in that respect. Those who learn this upper secondary school in general education in that country, they typically either they continue towards universities, some of them go afterwards to vocational training, and some of them go to these polytechnics and can continue there to master level, or can after polytechnics also go back to the more kind of liberal arts university type of system. Now those who have been in vocational training, they have also opportunities to specialize more within their own vocational field afterwards. And then there is this opportunity that somebody who is 16 years old and finishes the compulsory education goes to labor market, and then afterwards still takes on learning within the vocational training. In that country, this is very, very marginal phenomenon. So practically 97% they continue either here or here. Now, where would be community colleges in that system, please?
I was just going to ask you which country this is.
Well, this by chance it's Finland. It's Finland where I come from. But the reason is not, I didn't choose this for that reason that I particularly love Finland and come from there. The reason is that when I was here last year, your legislator has a school reform ad hoc committee, some kind of ad hoc committee, and they invited me to go there and explain Finnish education system. So I had to slide ready prepared. Now, if you look at these, community colleges would situate here, but stretch to there also, and so institutional really stretching to this, and this, and that's why it's so interesting for me. That it would really, it combines and concentrates a couple of functions that are provided by different institutions in that country. And if I would take here one of the more complicated countries, you would see even more boxes that relate to the function of community colleges. Now, what did I find out? Do I have anything to drink? Yes. Yes. So I go through now very quickly with a couple of key words about the key findings that I found during the study. First of all, about this whole question of relevance of learning. I mean, I explained to you that the question of transition from learning to work is one of the key issues, and there, of course, it leads us to the question that how relevant is your learning in relation to the needs of labor market. And in community colleges, the starting point that you start to look at this issue of what education, what training you provide in the community colleges, it starts from the needs of the local community, the environment, the service area, and that makes naturally this dialogue between the college and the business world in the service area as a kind of, it makes it as a must within the system. But also the fact that the community needs, the development needs in the community beyond the business needs are incorporated. It actually was an interesting issue that I also wanted to highlight. And I would say that in the European systems, some of the vocational training systems, even if they are strongly related to needs of companies and labor markets, this broader community development aspect is not so often reflected. In some countries there is this kind of development. Now, for example, in UK, the further education are the institutions or centers, they have this type of responsibility about the community around. But in many countries, vocational training is more related to sectors than to the community around. Now, another issue that I found very interesting was the fact that when community colleges are providing both these curriculum programs that provide young people a pathway to occupations, they are also providing this continuing training towards companies and tailor-made to the needs of community, to the companies. And actually this combination that they are doing the both, it creates a kind of automatic feedback system, because the continuing training by definition reacts to the changing needs of the companies. And this information that comes through the continuing training feeds in to the curriculum programs also. And that I found very interesting. We have a couple of countries in Europe also where the institutions who provide vocational training are also engaged in continuing training, but in some countries these two worlds are completely separate. And this connection between the two was, in my opinion, one of the points that we have to look at and be inspired by that. Now, the very strong connection between community college and the community around, and that as a starting point, it also bears a kind of risk of insularity, so that the training profile, the qualification profile that is developed within the community college, even if it's then authorized and approved at the state level, it might have a kind of relatively limited currency towards the labor market outside the community. And there are interesting developments going on in North Carolina, for example, to cope with this type of limitation, to assure that what you learn in the community college is relevant geographically much broader within the state or within the nation. Now, about the economic development aspect particularly, which is the one that North Carolina is very, very known and respected. I was told, and that was very interesting to learn about this, I understood that economic development, not only in North Carolina but in south of United States, has been, if you put it very simple, it has been very much about recruiting businesses to invest in south. And I was told that in North Carolina, one of the main carrots and incentives that is used towards the possible investors is the fact that your community college system is capable to always guarantee a kind of supply of skilled labor. according to the needs of the company, and that community college system is there from the very first day when economic development agencies or your Department of Commerce is negotiating with a possible investor. The community college system representatives are there around the table, and that's a very strong feature. It gives a kind of understanding how the system is considered as a strategic partner. An interesting issue is also that if it is in that way, that when you subsidize companies and to attract them to invest your region, if you, instead of giving them dollars, you put the dollars to develop and provide tailor-made training programs through community colleges so that you can supply the labor force, you are not only educating these possible workers for the company, you are also investing in the capacity of this community college to work further. So you are doing a capacity building in the community, which has a long-lasting effect, because if the company for some reason then anyway decides to move, you lose the jobs, but you don't lose the know-how in the community college what you develop through this investment. So it's an interesting model in that way. At local level, I visited a couple of community colleges. So actually, I don't really explain my methodology of doing this research, but I had a lot of meetings with people and trying to understand what is the understanding of those who work within the system, and that at the level of system. So I went many times to Raleigh to meet colleagues there, but then I also went to a couple of community colleges to try to understand how do they apply these principles in their local environment. And one of the very interesting issue was the kind of in some cases, I learned how the community college had really become a kind of strategic partner of a company, big companies in their own environment or service area, where the relationship became a kind of symbiosis. In that way that the company also started to use the community college not only in terms of training some of the or even continuously the labor force, but also being involved in the development strategies of the company. And so that of course brings the partnerships to more strategic level, and again provides community college with an opportunities to be more strategic in its own work. Finally, in that area, I used one of the examples, this biotechnology example in North Carolina. You have the bio network, which connects many of your community colleges. You have a couple of centers of excellence there who are looking at one particular aspect in the area of biotechnology. Some of them are thematic, so looking for example, pharmaceutical aspect of biotechnology, and some of them are more operational in terms of, for example, translating the coursework into virtual format so that the other community colleges can benefit from that directly, what is developed in one of the thematic centers. And I just, in my report, I use that example as an example of kind of cluster-oriented, really strategic action plan within a system of colleges. And I mentioned that it is really some kind of a model that you could imagine of, and you should imagine and you should replicate this kind of model independently of what sector it would be. You cannot have too many biotechnology sectors and clusters in a country or in the world, but whatever would be your sector, this kind of model how this biotechnology network was designed, Stuart was involved in that. It is really smart. So very good model for to be reflected in these smart specialization strategies. Now, social inclusion was an issue that I was not so sure whether what would I find about that, and I was actually then impressed by the fact that I found within the community college system also a couple of really good lessons about how the community colleges promote social inclusion and opportunities for those who are in difficulties to find their place in the labor market. And for example, the issue of there is a program called Basic Skills Plus, and it's a relatively new initiative which is related to two functions of community colleges. One is to help adult learners to develop their basic skills, so reading and mathematics and so on, so that they would be then ready to take up further learning. But at the same time, the plus is that it combines with this basic skills learning already from the very beginning a specific occupational learning. And the reason for that was that the experience was that if you are in a difficult situation, you are unemployed, for example, and you are lacking basic skills, and if you then imagine a learning road that you have to do your basic skills program in order to be able to start after that another program which would then eventually lead towards a occupational profile, and then you should start to look for possible job opportunities after that. The roads looks too long, and the time what you would need to invest in that, it is actually time matters. There are risks if the learning pathway is too long, and the basic skills plus is combining the issue of learning occupational profile and basic skills at the same time, and it appeared to be a very successful model. Another issue that I was interested in and found very interesting was this partnership with civil society organizations, so NGOs, non-profit organizations from the community. And notably in terms that I learned that actually the community college environment as such, for example, it might be an obstacle for somebody who is marginalized and outside of labor market and does not have the tradition of academic learning. It might be too frightening to go to a college. And then community colleges actually, in some cases, they provide training within the premises of local non-profit organizations to bring the learning to a kind of environment which is more relaxed and accessible for these people. Now, also some systemic reflections about the transparency and permeability between the different training systems or education systems. First of all, I found it's very striking that the simplicity of the system. I wrote in the report that every adult learner would know where to go, because you know, if I have a learning need, community college is the place where I can go. This is really, the simplicity is normally strength in this kind of issues. Then the proximity early college, okay, I skipped that because we spoke about that already. And then this issue of transfer between between community colleges and universities, I learned about that it is a relatively complex issue. Actually, you have this general articulation agreement, which finally it provides you with very good certainty of transfer if you complete the whole degree, associate degree in a community college. But if you have some courses, then it becomes more complex. However, what was interesting was this other type of transfer, which is more based on bilateral agreements between one community college and one university on the area, on the side of the applied sciences, engineering, for example. You learn in certain community college, and you know, when I have learned and completed my associate degree here, I can transfer to that particular university to continue my learning. It is, of course, relatively unflexible in that way, that if you have to go to this particular university. But on the other hand, it creates a very concrete pathway that the learner knows from the very beginning. And we have in the European context an exercise what we call credit transfer system for vocational training. And that is basically based with a little bit similar philosophy. We are now using that and developing that, mainly targeted to facilitate transfer of students or learning outcomes within vocational training systems between two countries or between two different fields, sectors, but it has a potential also, of course, to articulate between vocational training and higher education. And I was thinking that possibly this kind of bilateral agreements could be one step to open the doors and the pathways to that direction. Okay, so I was here 5 months. It was a very good time. I went back to Europe end of last year, and since January I'm there. I reported back to my hierarchy, my institution, about this time here. I provided a report. But then also I have had an opportunity to share these lessons, quite many others than those that I mentioned today, to stakeholders in Europe. First of all, we are actually currently now, we have been the whole year, we have been in a phase of preparing a kind of major communication coming out from Commission about the current challenges in education and training. The current working title is Rethinking Education, and that package will come in a way that there will be one communication which is about 10 pages, where Commission in very short language points out to important issues that must be faced. But then in the package there will be a couple of so-called staff working documents which provide more evidence to these key messages. And one of these staff working documents will look at vocational training. And so what I learned here has been a timely input to the whole process. I have myself been involved in drafting, and I have also shared, of course, the lessons from North Carolina with a couple of colleagues who are involved in that drafting. I had also when I went back my first presentation on North Carolina Community College system was to other colleagues in DG Education and Culture. In February I had what we call Conference du Midi. So during the lunch break you have an auditorium and the other colleagues are invited. I had a much bigger audience than today. Something like I think 70 people there, nicely from different fields of education and culture, and good debate about the findings. Then I had an opportunity to give a short presentation to leading policymakers, what we call directors generals, who are the highest level civil servants in charge of vocational training in the member states. We had a meeting between them in April. I made a presentation and there was a nice, although short, debate after that. I had a meeting of meeting or conference of a network composed by national kind of practitioners who had been involved in skills-related projects financed by the European Commission earlier. So there were people who were actually collecting the learning from previous projects in different member states related to skills development. And I had the opportunity to give them a presentation on these issues in May. I was contacted by Belgian authorities in May also that wouldn't you come to our conference? We are just developing now the short cycle higher education profiles and qualifications in Belgium, so I provided them also a presentation. And similarly, a meeting with these 4 associations that I mentioned, the weak under development associations representing the WET providers or provider organizations of vocational training in June. And then a very interesting conference in June in Amsterdam with people who are actually from different countries, in different countries, working on this short cycle higher education, so associate degree level of programs. Traditionally underdeveloped and not very often present in education systems in Europe. There's a recent study on that available, and you see it is moving now. It's related to the needs of, in some cases, provide easier, quicker access to labor market, I had there a group of people from Ohio also, from Ohio Community College system. And it was very, very interesting. Actually, the most flattering comment that I maybe ever have received in my life was in that context. I made my standard presentation on this, and after the presentation in the corridor, one of these colleagues from Ohio came there and said, Risto, you probably did a little bit like the French guy did about our political system, that you draw attention to issues that we don't recognize ourselves. And I was thinking, my God, he's referring to I now forgot the name. Who is that French political scientist? Ooh, la la la. It's come. It will come. My God, and I'm in a film. Then I don't remember. Yes. The report is also on where we are in that way. No, I wanted to also mention this. We have an agency for the European Union which is working with partner countries. So countries that are in the process or that they are candidate countries to become members of the European Union, or who are other partner countries, like we have Eastern partnerships, so towards east from current European Union, or southern partnerships within the Mediterranean area. European Training Foundation based in Torino in Italy. And the director of the European Training Foundation contacted me in July. She had been in that meeting there and followed my presentation. She contacted, said that actually I'm thinking that within our work with Mediterranean countries, where they are now currently shaping their education systems, it could be interesting also to little bit reflect on this community college model and this type of institutional setting, and she might use the result of this study or other information what is available on community college system in her work together with these partner countries there. So the report is on net. One of my two sons who were introduced also helped me to put it there. And yesterday I checked the situation, 165 clicks so far. It's not so much if you think there are 500 million inhabitants in Europe, but it tells you that it didn't remain only in my office, the report. Yeah. Now, I promised to mention also a couple of issues where you could look learning other way around, so learning from Europe. And first issue that I already mentioned earlier, the dual systems. It is a model which is currently in the spotlight in Europe, but it has been very much so also in US. Do you remember who is Jackie Bray? She was mentioned by President Obama in his State of Union speech in January or February, yeah. And so Jackie Bray is one of the learners in Charlotte, in North Carolina, and she participated in this Apprentices 2000 program in Charlotte, where Charlotte Community College is working together with a couple of companies within this kind of dual model. Now the story, of course, it's interesting in that way that these companies that started the program Apprentices 2000, they are all European from origin. And the point is that it is still currently a kind of curiosity in your context. But in many European countries, as I explained, it is really integrated in the mainstream of education system. And it is something which is interesting to look at, because if apprentices system remains as a curiosity, it might have very narrow currency also, as the qualification, the credential, what you get out there. But if it's properly integrated in education system so that you get a qualification which is nationally recognized, or at least statewide recognized way, and it is designed together with businesses and with education authorities, it becomes one of the interesting elements in your education system. With the relevance that I already mentioned, the transition to labor market, Jackie Bray, she was actually a kind of adult learner. She had become unemployed. She had this opportunity to start to learn within this program, and she continued to get paid, which is of course an important element for an adult learner when somebody needs to retake learning. Now, this is interesting, this role of social partners. We are in a famous non-union state, but when in European context, in vocational training, we always refer to partnership with social partners, and that includes business and representatives of employees. And it's interesting in that way that when you develop curricula for vocational training programs, it is a strength when if you have input also from those who represent people who are actually working in that field and who are practitioners who identify the skills needs from different perspective than from company perspective. I think there's room for innovation also from that angle, and that is something which is very well organized in some of the European countries. It's systematic, it's continuous, it's dynamic. Now, the system-level transparency, just as a kind of notion, there is this exercise that I said, the comparability of the levels of different European education systems. We are in an exercise which is called European Qualification Framework to create this transparency and visibility. I know that Lumina Foundation in US is promoting actually similar exercise. It's called something like qualification profiles, or a little bit differently, but it is similar exercise, and the European Qualification Framework has really been a source of inspiration for that exercise. Now, the fact that vocational training has really a positive image in a couple of countries, there are two elements in that in Europe. There are countries like Germany or Austria where it has always had this kind of strong status and been well respected. My country, Finland, is a country which, when I was there, vocational training was really considered as a kind of lower option, and it was not attractive and it was not highly regarded. And now today it is highly regarded as a possible and attractive learning option, and it is because of systematic reforms that were made during the last 15 years more or less. So there are examples in Europe where you could see how an image of vocationally oriented programs has changed completely. Peter, how do you pronounce the family name of Peter? Koklanis. And Daniel Gitterman, or anyway, they from UNC, from this global research center, they published recently a discussion paper which was called Beyond Plato versus Plummer. And it was very much about rethinking the presentation of educational opportunities and finding a way where you could find more individual opportunities, and as they didn't call pathways but pathways. And they explained, look at this report and see why they call it pathways. But this notion that you can change actually the image of vocationally oriented education might be interesting also to look at European experience. And as I mentioned that I was last year invited by your legislator to explain the Finnish education system, it was related to the question that whether vocational education if it has a standing at upper secondary level, whether it could have an impact to reducing early school leaving. And we do have this kind of, I mean, if you look statistically, it looks a little bit in Europe in that way also, that countries with strong vocational training systems, they have a little bit better results in terms of diminishing early school leaving. And so it is possibly an interesting issue to look at also. Now, I promised that to finish this presentation by mentioning just a couple of examples that you could possibly do your thesis or whatever on these. And the first is that does somebody care about soft law in EU? I mean, in the area of vocational training, we are, as I said, it's an area where European Commission, the European Union does not have really strong competencies. But we are doing a lot of work, and where is the impact then, somebody can ask. And I would say that, for example, the European qualification framework that I mentioned earlier in the presentation, it's an issue where if you would look at this, what happened actually? At the European level, we created a recommendation, so soft law, asking member states to engage in a process where they refer their own education systems to this European level framework, saying that this qualification is comparable to that level description at EU level. And this process is actually now running in all the 27 member states. And it is interesting that in some cases, and I think actually in quite many cases, what happened is that the European level recommendation is translated into practice through legislation in the member states. So soft at the European level becomes hard in the member state. And it would be interesting to just to look at one country. I mean, you can always imagine very big comparative studies, but if you just look one country, what happened in Germany after the creation of European qualification framework? Which kind of debate took place in Germany after that? And what impact it had actually to, for example, to the articulation between vocational training and higher education? It would be extremely interesting case to look at, and a couple of others. The EC-VET, the credit transfer system for vocational training, is similar. If you look at what is currently happening in French-speaking part of Belgium, they are completely reforming the vocational education system there, and it is very, very much inspired by the elements that are included in this 2009 recommendation for credit transfer system for vocational training. Again, soft law EU level, hard reform at member states level. European Training Foundation, I already mentioned that the aspect they are working with our partner countries, and it's quite interesting that sometimes we have a feeling that the partner countries, they are even more keen to follow what has been developed within the European policy dialogue on education training, more keen to follow than member states are. And so that would be another interesting issue. Again, for example, take in vocational training, we have what we call Bruges Communiqué, which is currently setting the priorities and reforms that should take place in the member states. And look how European Training Foundation is working with partner countries following that agenda. And in order to do that, you don't need to go to many of the partner countries. It's enough that you go to Torino to meet people who work for European Training Foundation. It's a very beautiful place. I mentioned the European semester also earlier, the new way how the Europe 2020 strategy is implemented. And there, just to go to, for example, one of the Directorate Generals and start to ask people how your way of working changed because of following that new governance setting within the European semester, or to look even more broadly with how the EU-level cooperation between member states. When you go outside of the hard competencies of the Union and go to these areas where competencies are softer, how the cooperation between member states has changed after the European semester logic. The same issue, how it has changed the relationship between Commission and Member States in some cases, and and possibly also then to take one member state and see whether this new way of working has had an influence in the EU-related the whole process in the member state. And these are just examples that I picked up from the presentation. We could continue the list, and as I said, substance-wise, everything was very interesting. So, happy to try to answer to any questions, and thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
I see community colleges, they look great on paper, but they're highly dependent on funding. You mentioned it a little bit. I guess I'm from California and they have an extensive community college network, but I see a lot of my friends and people who are going to community college, they're spending 3, 4, 5 years in these 2-year programs because of access to classes aren't there. It's pretty much being, they're not able to progress through their learning, and retention rates are going down, and it's pretty much lost time for a lot of them. Have you seen this in North Carolina at all? Also, where do you see the direction of funding going in these European nations through the austerity-ridden times?
Yeah. Well, you are touching the so-called completion agenda. Those who are working on the community college side and even more broadly in higher education, they say currently in the US you have the completion agenda actually. Earlier it was about access, now it's about completion. And indeed in community college, it's very, very striking for me when I was first time looking at the statistics of educational attainment in US, and I found this category, some college. So you have a high school level, and then you have the category some college, and then you have associate degree, and then bachelor degree. And so that's the phenomenon. People who enter into community college or 4-year college, and who possibly also try to continue to work at the same time or start to work at that time, and they never complete a degree. Even an associate degree or 4 years degree. Interesting phenomena, and you do have that also in North Carolina, and there are a lot of efforts currently to address this issue. One of the interesting issues was there was last year going one of these projects they call curricula improvement projects, CHIPS, and one of them was actually looking at how to better connect and combine the continuing training part and the curricula part, so that people who have participated in different occasions to training or education in community colleges and have certain pieces of credentials, how that could be better put together and articulated with a degree requirements, so that you could also complete a associate degree, or at least to complete a diploma or certificate, which also have relatively high value for labor markets and are recognized credentials. And so that was interesting because they told that the currently situation is that if you participate in certain type of course on the side of continuing training, it might have the same content as on the side of curricula, but it's not always possible to put it in your backpack and then transfer that to the side of curricula, because there are some certain formal requirements for the learning within the curricula side. That leads to the question of more general question of recognition of informal and non-formal learning and prior learning independently of the setting of learning. That's very high on the agenda in Europe currently. Actually, one of the new soft laws will be recommendation on validation, recognition and validation of non-formal and informal learning. The idea is that when you come to the learning and you have already been in the labor market, or you have been active in associative life or whatever, and you have learned some kind of objectively assessable skills and competencies. You could go through a kind of assessment process and you could get them recognized, which helps you then to get a diploma or certificate or a degree qualification completed. So it's an important issue. Now in North Carolina, the state funding had declined and tuition fees had gone up. I don't remember now by heart the figures, you can see it from my report. So clear tendency there. Still I think in a nationwide comparison, the tuition fees in community colleges in North Carolina are relatively low still, but they have been going up and substituting to a certain extent the state funding. Please.
So you've talked about the geographical mismatch in the EU and how that affects mobility. And I mean, of course, it's not just a question about distance in the EU, but also about language and culture. So I wanted to know if there have been any attempts made on a European level to include language and cultural classes in vocational educational training to maybe raise the willingness of workers to go to another country.
Yeah. Yes. Very much so. I mean, of course, we are in the starting point where European Union does not have the competence to tell what should be taught and learned. So this kind of competence to intervene in curricula directly, that we don't have. But languages has been very much in the spotlight because of this mobility issue, but also because of other issues. I mean, it is really foreign languages is part of the key competencies that we know that people should learn now in modern society. A couple of years ago, European Commission established a high-level group on languages. High-level groups is one way of working in on European issues. You invite prominent experts from the field, and they compose a group, and then they deliver a report. And then this report is feeding into policy making. And this high-level group on languages, they came to a conclusion that they recommended an approach that every European should learn 2 foreign languages, at least 2 foreign languages. And the approach was you learn English for international relations, business and or whatever relations, and you learn another language for personal enrichments and cultural connections and so on. And it was, I think, very well received, this recommendation. Now, to put that in practice, it is of course very challenging, and language learning is a difficult area. And we have to challenge not only in vocational training, also when you go to general education, the foreign language skills is really, for the European circumstances, it is a big challenge. In vocational training, one of the tools that we are using to promote mobility and also including promote language learning is these mobility programs that we have. Erasmus is very known from higher education. We have our own for vocational training. It's Leonardo da Vinci. And Leonardo program is currently provides opportunity for maybe 3% of learners during the vocational training period time. They can participate through the Leonardo program in a mobility of being 2 weeks or 2 months in another country and then come back. And even if it's a small percentage currently, it's increasing, and it is affecting the kind of limits and readiness towards mobility. In some countries, Finland is again top performer in that respect. In Finland has a figure about 10% of students in vocational training go into mobility to another country. And it has been one part of those which have affected the image of vocational training in Finland, what I referred earlier to. The fact that when you go to vocational training, you also have this perspective that you can go during your learning time to another country and come back and so on. It has really positively influenced the image. Now there are other obstacles to mobility also, and we have systematically looked at them also. But language remains a big issue.
So actually my question is kind of the opposite point of that. If you're a state government and you're investing money in training your people, isn't it bad for you to have your workers go to a different state in order to work? In that, because you could invest a ton of money in your educational system, and then it would be easy for one of the other states to just drop their taxes on businesses, and then basically set up shop somewhere else, and so they draw all the workers who you just trained for them. And that's a lot harder in Europe, but it's definitely possible within the United States because most of the workforce is fairly mobile.
Yeah. Yeah, it's less mobile in Europe, and we would need to increase the mobility. You are right. I mean, strategically, of course, it's problematic if it would be this kind of win-lose situation, but it's probably not. It is more likely to be a win-win situation. You have exactly the same problematics inside a company. And so here in North Carolina, they had a saying that when community colleges are trying to promote towards companies certain programs and learning opportunities, sometimes companies are saying, well, if I start to train my people and then they leave. And then the question that community college people put back to the company was that, and if you don't train and they stay, what happens? That's dramatic also. If you don't invest in human capital and skills, you are going to lose anyway. So it's not that black and white. In European context, there has been certain brain drain programs, notably within after the large enlargement, and it has been problematic in some of the new member states, the phenomenon. So it's a real question. I don't have you an answer to that, better answer than I still believe that if you calculate the totality, investing in your human capital in whatever country you are, that is the best policy work to do.
Right, but I mean, it's not clear to me why you would try to train someone like, hey, we want you to learn more languages so you can go somewhere else.
Yeah, well, it's not only for that, because if you don't learn these languages, there are many other issues that you cannot do. Maybe you cannot be mobile, but your businesses are also suffering from the skills shortages then. And mobility is not one-way track. It is also very much so, and that's what we have within the education programs. When young people they go to another country during the learning time, they come back, they enrich the environment in their own already on the learning institution, and afterwards in the workplace. They might go again somewhere. They got appetite. When I was young, I was in Germany, and then I moved to Belgium. Now I even go to North Carolina. So you don't lose the appetite necessarily, but you also might return. And so it's much more complicated than thinking that if you teach languages, people all leave. Basically, actually, I think even in U.S. the mobility is very, very high in comparison to Europe, but it's still not so high. There are a lot of reasons why people want to be where they are. When you are at a certain life situation, you are rooted to your environment, and so it's not very likely that the mobility figures would be extremely high in a short term in Europe, we have so low mobility figures that it is everybody accepts that that we should aim at improving the labor mobility in Europe.
My question is about the perception of vocational training. You mentioned that in some countries it's respected and accepted as equal or as part of the educational system, whereas in other countries it's looked down upon and it's considered embarrassing. Why do you think that is, and what can be done to change those perceptions, especially in countries where it's considered a lower, thing?
Yeah, it's of course one of these phenomena where you don't know what is the origin, what is the reason, what is the outcome, and because so they are difficult to change these kind of issues. Now it is strong in countries where who have a strong tradition in vocational training. That's easy to say, and then it's impossible for the others to change the situation if they don't have a strong tradition how to do it. But of course we have certain key observations there. One is that if vocational training provides objectively measured good quality learning and good career opportunities, that certainly influences and affects the positive image. If it provides very good transition from learning to attractive jobs, it affects. Now to do that, for example, to be able to provide this very good perspective for easy transition from learning to job, it requires that vocational training does include these on-job learning periods and a good articulation between the vocational training provision and the business world, be it in the format of dual system or be it in the format of school-based learning which articulates very well with the environment. Further learning opportunities is very important also, so that if you enter into vocational training, that you have your perspectives after that open. I had an opportunity a couple of years ago to discuss with a young Finnish girl who was just finishing the compulsory education, and she decided to go to vocational training, and the main reason that she told me that why she decided to go is that because I keep all the doors open. And so she entered into vocational training. I had another opportunity 3 years ago to discuss with two parents who had 3 children, and all of them they had chosen vocational training. And that moment, the mother told me that not so happy, not so. I would have expected them to go to higher education and to university studies. And but then she also said that okay, but there are of course always opportunities to take up learning because the system is flexible. And now today, from these 3, one is learning law at university, and the other one is continuing an engineering program in a kind of University of Applied Sciences, and the third one is collecting her first experiences in working life. But so the openness of the system after the vocational training is a major element also for the attractiveness. Then we come to the issue of when I started saying that good quality or high quality learning, and so how do you guarantee that? One of the really key issues is then the training of trainers or teachers. So for vocational education there is a particularly important aspect of keeping trainers and teachers continuously in a dialogue and exchange of experience with businesses. so that they know really concretely what is going on in the business life, so that that can influence so that their teaching is accurate actually to the current situation. So this kind of continuing learning systems for teachers is really a key element also, depending how your system is shaped. Some of the elements. Please.
You were talking about how in North Carolina the community colleges and the community sort of interact, and the community colleges support the local businesses, and then the local businesses then support the community college, and also very local and regional. And I'm wondering if this is an area where the Commission is trying to engage regions more than member states, or if you're just trying to do softball and then get member states to implement and it trickles down to regions.
Yeah, we do. How would I say? In one of the, I refer to this rethinking education. One of the key messages in that is this dynamic connection between vocational training and the local and regional economy. And we refer to these kind of partnerships there. The starting point is different in that respect, that in most of the European countries, the institutions who provide vocational training, they are very small in comparison to your community colleges. So your community colleges are much bigger institutions, and they have bigger institutional capacity. But there has been interesting development, and in some of the European countries have directly actually already been inspired by the regional development function of community colleges. For example, in Netherlands, they have this kind of centers, and the center is a kind of broker which is then providing the connection in a way that it is serving a couple of these institutions, and then doing the connection to the business world in the region. And so it is really one of the issues that is on the agenda, and we try to promote reflections on that. We cannot Commission cannot provide answers, but it can draw attention that this would be an issue to be addressed and developed within the national context. Every national context is again different.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will add this to the list of presentations and the debate notably, because it was very good debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you.